Teaching and research at the SOS. I'm very happy to introduce our presenters today. Very impressed by l'auditoire, so it's a very happy day. And I'm glad to introduce a super team that a team who recently completed a pilot study of a caregiver support program, which will be presented today. This was a great collaboration between the community, the clinicians, and research partners, and you will hear about it, and I'm sure you'll be convinced. On the community side, we have here Dr. Ella Amir. Dr. Amir is the Executive Director of AMI Quebec since 1990. Dr. Amir, welcome. Under her leadership, the organization has become one of the principal resources in Quebec for families struggling to cope with mental illness. Dr. Amir was the chair of the Family Caregivers Advisory Committee for the Mental Health Commission of Canada since its inception in 2007 and until 2012. And she is now on the Advisory Council of the Commission. So we're very glad you are here. I also have to introduce you to Marcela Hidalgo. Marcela Hidalgo, so many of you know of. And Marcela will be presenting today also. She has 15 years of experience on the clinical side, working as head of social services. In the few last years, she has joined the research team of the St. Mary's Research Center. She's there as a coordinator for patient and family engagement. And also Dr. Jane McCusker, who's the principal scientist at St. Mary's Research Center. Dr. McCusker is an epidemiologist whose research over the past 25 years has focused on 4 broad areas of interest, of great interest. One is care of vulnerable older adults in the emergency department, and she's very supportive for one of our priority research and clinical projects of the SOS. One of her other area is delirium in older adults, depression in older adults, and family caregiving. The purpose of her research is to improve the delivery of healthcare services to vulnerable patients and their family members, and we will get to hear about this. Thank you, and have a good presentation. Thank you very much. I'll pass it on to Dr.
Thank you. Thank you very much. For those of you who may not be familiar with AMI Quebec, I'll just say very briefly that AMI Quebec is a family association in the community that for the past 40 years has been working with families in the context of mental illness. So we are working predominantly with family caregivers who have a loved one diagnosed with mental illness. Over the years we have found out that in order for families to fulfill their caregiving responsibilities, they need a regular access to information, guidance, and support so they can actually deliver their responsibilities, but also minimize the risk for their own well-being. We also found out that family caregivers can be very important facilitators in the recovery journey of loved ones with mental illness. We know that those family caregivers, when they are well supported, they can, as I said earlier, can do their job much better and also help improve the quality of life of their loved ones. We also found out that well-supported caregivers, as I said earlier, will be able to be better caregivers, but also will be able to sustain their own well-being. And if such supports are not available, there is a risk to their own health, both physically and emotionally. We also noted that there is a very important contribution that family caregivers are making to the health and social services system, and would have been very costly if we wanted to replace it by formal services. L'Appui Montreal, which funded this project, works predominantly with caregivers to elderly people in all kinds of situations. This is a bit of a departure for AMI Quebec because the care recipients that we identified in this project would be elderly patients who come to the hospital with a medical situation, with a medical condition, rather than with a diagnosable mental illness. But since our preoccupation, or one of our major preoccupations, is really to help addressing the mental health and the well-being of caregivers, we felt that this project is an expansion of our work rather than a deviation from our work. So we put together a little project. Basically, we identified what I believe is untapped and potentially very important area, which is addressing the needs of caregivers who come with elderly patients to the hospital, and felt that this is something that we could maybe make a contribution. We approached St. Mary's with a proposal to collaborate with us on this project. I have to say that St. Mary's was the second hospital that we approached, but was the first one that welcomed us with open arms. A steering committee that was made up from representatives from AMI Quebec and St. Mary's, both clinical and research representations, got together to determine the outlines of this project. We have agreed that a caregiver advocate would be, it would be good if someone with caregiving experience would be designated as a caregiver advocate. So AMI Quebec hired this advocate, Ben, who is sitting here, and the mentoring of the caregiver advocate, as well as the monitoring and evaluating of this project, has been done collaboratively throughout the project. I can say that this project has been work in progress throughout its pilot phase. The pilot phase is now over. March 31st was the end of this project, but we certainly hope that we'll be able to secure funding so we can refine this project and create a replicable model that will be able to easily be implemented in other hospital settings. I would end by just saying that the collaboration, the partnership with St. Mary's has been a very positive and very gratifying experience. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to expand on the work of AMI Quebec, and I look forward to continue our collaboration. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we started off. On the units, actually, we identified, at the time it was the program of medicine that we identified as probably where we knew that those units were acute care units that would most likely have the patients and caregivers that we were hoping to recruit. So from there, once we identified the units and we talked to the program manager at the time, we went ahead and contacted the head nurses who then helped us to set up the focus groups with the staff. And I know it says nursing staff group focus groups, but it was actually a multidisciplinary focus group. So we held the two focus groups, one in 5 South and one in 8 Main, to kind of see what the staff felt that the caregivers that they saw on the units, what they would need, or what they needed, what the needs were, essentially. And so we kind of, at that point, identified with the staff that they saw the caregivers would benefit from emotional support to deal with the distress. Some people were there, were caregivers that had been first-time caregivers and caregivers that were just becoming caregivers due to the maybe possible hospitalization of their loved one in that moment. The physical support to avoid burnout, so for some of those caregivers have been doing it for quite a while. And then the social support to avoid isolation, which we know is one of the things that caregivers have to contend with, given their type of work that they do with caregiving, and that they're on their own mostly. So, and then we talked about, everybody's role. Everyone had a role already on the staff. So, we knew that clinical resources were stretched to kind of expand, asking people to expand even more to kind of reach out to caregivers. So we thought when Ella came to speak to us, we thought this was a great opportunity to pilot a study to see if having a caregiver advocate would be able to bring something positive to, or something more extra and positive also for the caregivers. So there we go. So at the time, then we defined that the nurses were probably best suited because they each had their patients that they saw, and they would be able to help us identify, to identify the patients that were suitable. The patients had to be, so the criteria was they had to be 65 and over patients, and they had to have a family caregiver, because sometimes people have private caregivers and private paid caregivers, but we were looking at family caregivers, and that they were not going to be discharged to a long-term care facility, but rather that they were going to be going home. And also they helped identify incompetent patients so that the caregiver advocate wasn't just going to be going in and speaking to a patient who maybe had cognitive deficits, and so we wanted to make sure we knew who those patients were. And part of my role was also assisting with training the caregiver advocate and basically what the caregiver advocate does and doesn't do. So we wanted to make sure there was a differentiation between, for example, social work and caregiver advocate, or what nursing was doing and what the CA was doing, the caregiver advocate. So we wanted to specifically look at the role of that role, so it was clear for the staff what Ben was going to be doing. And that was to empower the caregivers. It wasn't counseling, it was more emotional support, and really kind of, helping them to, kind of activating them to follow up on resources, or to take a look at the resources that were available to them out in the community. Because oftentimes caregivers, when they're feeling overwhelmed, don't necessarily have that capacity in that moment to know where to look and to give information. We wanted to make sure that they give it, so I'll go through a little bit of that in the next slide. And there was a continued, on my part, so there was a sort of continued support and troubleshooting. So I was sort of the person identified for the units to contact if there was any kind of issues that had come up with the project, or if we were having trouble identifying patients or getting patients and caregivers. But we worked really well together, and then integrated very well and easily into both teams. So that really helped to facilitate us getting as many caregivers as we did. So. The intervention design. So essentially, the caregiver advocate gave information about the caregiving process and its challenge. So really talking to caregivers about what they were doing, what the process, what they do. A lot of people that are caregiving don't necessarily know how much work they're doing, and the challenges that they face were really identified by them, the caregivers, and so that helped us kind of look at how we could tailor the information or support that would come afterwards. And also there was information around the available community resources and how to contact them, because that's not always easy as well. It's just trying to help find, really guiding them through that network. And empowering them to be able to do that on their own. The emotional support really was, the techniques mostly used are active listening, reassurance, and encouragement. And again, when I talked about activation, that really was around them kind of setting the priorities of what was important for them and doing some problem solving with the caregiver advocate and identifying emotional self-care skills. So how do you take care of yourself? Like, what is self-care, for example? So that's the kind of information that the caregiver advocate would give to the caregivers. And it was delivered, so this is how it was done. So it was really tailored individual support sessions. So Ben would kind of get to know the caregiver and essentially, and there was a certain aspect of supervision with me and then later with Ella for Ben, for the caregiver advocate, because these support sessions were delivered directly from him to the caregiver. There was 5 sessions, and that was really during the so it was from hospital to home, so it was during the transition back home, and it was over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. So these sessions would include, again, as I said, whether it was information, support, trying to and activation, trying to encourage caregivers to both self-care, but also to reach out to community resources that already exist out there for caregivers. This was offered in person at the hospital as much as possible, and or over the telephone once they went home, if they were not available to come in. So that's a bit of an overview of what of how things can move on. We can take questions afterwards. Now pass this on to Jean.
Thanks, Marcella. And I just want to quickly recognize 2 people. Manon Durad, who is our project coordinator, who really made the whole thing work, coordinating between all of us and Ben. And Claudia, who was our follow-up interviewer and did a great job with that. Okay, so I just want to quickly kind of situate this project in the literature on transitional, this is a trendy term, transitional interventions, also known as discharge planning interventions. So the literature clearly tells us that older people are at high risk at hospital discharge, that a high percentage have various adverse outcomes, death, readmission, functional decline, etc. The literature shows there are serious communication gaps between patients, family, and healthcare providers during this period. Differences in expectations of family members and healthcare professionals about what can happen after discharge. And clearly the bottom line is that good discharge planning can help alleviate a lot of problems. What about caregivers? Why should we focus on them? Well, we know they have high rates of emotional distress around the time of discharge. Caregivers struggle with lack of information or training about their role following discharge. For example, what are they supposed to do about their medications? What about other self-care issues? What about services? Burnout has already been pointed out, threatens continued care. And nursing home admission may occur for some of these patients where the caregiver can't handle things. There's good evidence that integrating caregivers into discharge planning is associated with fewer readmissions. And I think that makes sense when you think about it. The caregiver is an essential part of the team that is often overlooked. Caregivers who are involved in discharge planning report better health and greater acceptance of the caregiver role. So, how do we conduct the study? The research assistant, who was actually then functioned as research assistant and caregiver advocate, approached patients 65 and over who were not from or going to long-term care and who spoke English or French. All those with a caregiver were invited to participate, and incompetent patients provided assent, and caregivers were invited to provide informed consent. So, for this phase of the study, we in fact had an earlier part that I'm not going to talk about where we did a needs assessment. We simply collected information on what caregiver needs were during this period. We did not try to do an intervention. So this is phase 2, where we are piloting the intervention. We recruited 91 dyads of patients and caregivers. And this was almost 30% of the patients that were identified who had a family caregiver. So we thought it was quite good uptake, actually. So the characteristics of patients, their mean age was 82, 53% were female, 32% have been hospitalized in the last 2 years. 70% had significant cognitive impairment. Either they've been diagnosed with dementia in the previous 2 years, or when tested, they had moderate to severe cognitive impairment, or they were judged by staff to be incompetent. And in addition, 22% had depression or anxiety according to standardized scales. So when Alice said they were moving into an area that wasn't necessarily mental health, this is very much a mental health. The patients, over 90% have either cognitive impairment or other mental health problem. Now that's just the patients. When we did as caregivers, they were younger, almost 80% female. This is what we usually find. The relationship, 40% spouse, 51% adult child, 70% tested as significant anxiety on the HAD scale, and 59% significant depression. So mental health problems are important in the caregivers. And almost 60% perceived that they had a high burden of care. That's using the Zarek scale, which is a well-known measure of burden. So how about participation? Out of the 91 caregivers who enrolled in the study, 97% received at least one intervention session. And one of the three who did not receive it was because the patient died. And quite a high rate, 69% completed 5 sessions. We don't usually see such high rates of completion of this type of intervention. The average duration of the 5 sessions was 19 minutes for each one. Now, what were the needs that caregivers expressed to our caregiver advocate? So most frequently, we have anxiety or depression, emotional burden, issues with home care, communication with staff, physical health problems of the caregiver, transportation problems, and social support, social isolation. So we did a follow-up after the intervention, about 4 months after enrollment, to find out what caregivers thought of the intervention. And this was done by an independent research assistant. So we completed a follow-up questionnaire, which was either completed by telephone or by interview. Telephone or self-completed questionnaire in 66% of the sample. And an additional 13% completed a short telephone interview where we asked them basic satisfaction questions. Caregivers are very busy people, and it's hard to get them to focus on a questionnaire. So that's why we had this additional option. And we found that participation in follow-up was associated with the relationships, so spouses were more likely to participate in the follow-up than other relationships. And caregivers who had anxiety, depression, and burden were more likely to participate. There was no association with intervention completion, by the way, so this was not biased by whether the caregiver had completed the intervention. So what did we find? So in terms of satisfaction, the larger sample, we found that 77% received the kind of support they had expected. Some of them said they didn't know what to expect when they signed up for this intervention. 91% said they would recommend the program to others, so that's an important indication of satisfaction. The most helpful aspects of the intervention were almost everyone said listening and understanding needs, responding to needs, information on community resources, and a little bit less for helping to select community resources. We found there were significant declines in the depression and anxiety scores, as shown in these graphs, from baseline to follow-up. Use of community resources. 40% of participants reported that they had contacted one or more community resources after entering the study. 21% contacted CLSCs. 18% contacted other resources for tangible support related to caregiving, such as house cleaning. 11% contacted other sources for emotional support, such as, so this was for them, for example, support groups. Now, I've just given a few quotes here that we got from the interviews to give you an idea. So the things that people found helpful. It was good to get the information for when I need it. So the point is that they didn't necessarily follow up right away, but they felt happy to have the information for when they needed it. It helps just knowing who to call if and when I need help. The caregiver advocate reminded me to take care of myself. I downloaded an app on meditation. The literature helped me to better understand and cope with my husband's dementia. I got answers about different things to do to help with anxiety and stress and worries. So different types of comments that reflected the different needs of caregivers. Barriers and areas for improvement. It's hard to contact organizations and doctors myself. So this was a comment that several people made, that they would have liked a little more help actually making the linkages. I didn't have time to contact resources. I called a lot of community resources, but many did not respond, were closed, and could not help me. So frustration, you're given the information, but when you follow up, you don't get what you're looking for. I wanted more concrete solutions. I needed help in the house, meals brought, just emotional support is not enough. So here there's a need for something more than was offered in the intervention itself. So in conclusion, we think that the caregiver support and information intervention appears to fill a service gap and to be well received. 29% uptake among families with a family caregiver, which we think is a significant percentage. The initial pilot testing is promising and indicates high satisfaction, but a randomized controlled trial is needed to further establish the efficacy of the intervention. Okay, so the next steps. We have actually developed a structured manual for the caregiver advocate, which is based on principles of self-management, problem solving, prioritization, skills building, reflecting the focus of the intervention, but in a more structured way so that this could be used to train other caregiver advocates or for other individuals who might wish to deliver the intervention. A notebook to guide the caregiver advocate through the 5 sessions exploration of needs, identifying priority problems, action planning, and linking with community resources. So it's just formalizing many of the principles that we try to include in the intervention. And then at this, I guess, we would welcome, we've got plenty of time for questions and discussion, so we would really welcome your thoughts about how this type of intervention should be integrated into discharge planning. Should it be offered as a freestanding intervention, just independent of usual discharge planning? Should it be somehow integrated into discharge planning and be one component of a comprehensive discharge plan? We'd really welcome thoughts from anybody here as to where we should go with this. So I guess I'd like to stop now, and maybe Marcella, if you might like to come up with me to help me field the questions and the discussion.
I think you deserve it. So as Dr. McCusker mentioned, there's plenty of time and room for questions and comments.
Caregiver advocate, Ben, is sitting right here.
Yeah,
So if
maybe.
anyone wants to ask him anything, that's fine too. Right, Ben? All right,
Well, maybe
fire away, question.
maybe a very general question
Yeah.
was, what was, in your opinion, the most striking or surprising results that came out of this pilot, of the experiment? Were you surprised in any way with some results? Dr. Amir says, no, this is the kind of results you expected.
In a way, I think it is. I think that it basically just reinforced our sense that caregivers can benefit from help. And, as I say, this is exactly the orientation that we are working with in AMI Quebec, and I think that caregivers deserve support, information, etc., no matter in what domain they are working. So, I'm not really surprised. In fact, I'm encouraged to, to believe that this is really something that has to be implemented on a more, larger scale and in a more robust way everywhere where there are caregivers.
I'll pass this to Marcella next, but I was surprised that we had such a substantial uptake from caregivers. Our previous experience recruiting caregivers suggests that it's very hard. This is a very stressful time for them. They're very stressed, the patient is very stressed. It's hard to get them to think about participating in a research project. So this was actually better than I expected. Marcella?
I don't think I was very surprised by the number of caregivers who needed support. I think having worked in social services, we knew, and I think the staff and the floors knew that the caregivers were going through, a lot, but I think that it was a really nice surprise to see how many people engaged with them and with the staff, and that really, and that the staff also engaged with the patients and the family members, so that there was this, there's movement happening, and I think that was maybe part of the reason why there was, maybe it was a part of the reason why people felt engaged, was because there was a buy-in, there was support from the top down, and we knew that we had the support of the staff as well, who felt that this was an important, significant, and meaningful issue that we wanted to address. So,
can you just remind us how much time between baseline and the second questionnaire?
The follow-up questionnaire was about 4 months after recruitment, and I think it was most caregivers were approached within the first week after the patient had been admitted, and in most cases the intervention began very soon after that. I don't have the number with me, but it was before the second week, I think.
We have at least 3 questions.
No, that answered my
Oh,
question. That's
okay.
what I wanted to.
Okay. There was a second question? Maybe you could, just for recording matters, it would be good if we would speak louder or use, should I use a microphone?
The question was, what was the training the patient advocate received for helping caregivers?
Well, I think what's sort of the answer we both Ella and I can talk about, because when Ella was thinking of how to, or who she sort of saw in that position, maybe I'll let you speak, Ella, about your insights around that, because we together sat through some interviews, and I think we started off with a vision, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ella, but initially someone who had caregiving, had gone through a caregiving experience. We thought that that was a very significant piece, that somebody who had kind of had a lived experience of caregiving. And as we went through the interview process, we interviewed them, and not only did he have that part of the experience, a caregiving experience, but he also had a psychosocial background as well. So and we made sure that we were clear and Ella was very clear about how she envisioned that role. So again, differentiating between a professional like a social worker, psychologist, and so on, and a caregiver advocate. We chose that name not simply to suggest that that person was going to advocate for the patient, but as an advocate for the caregiver. In other words, for helping them to access information and resources, to understanding what self-care is, to understanding what their own role as a caregiver is. So I'm going to let Ella add on to that, and I can speak a bit more about this.
Thank you. I think that it's really interesting because, this is really a reflection of the evolution of this project. Everything that Marcella said was exactly, how it happened. But in fact, I think that in retrospect, I'm not sure that we would have chosen the title as caregiver advocate. Because, at the beginning when we talked about it, we thought that indeed, Ven is going to advocate on behalf of caregivers. But, as we define the perimeters and so on, we have agreed that his role shouldn't be really as a proactive advocate, but rather as providing information, emotional support, guiding to resources, and so on and so forth. So in a way, I think that the difficult work was really to tone down a little bit our initial expectations and, help Ven to work within the boundaries of the role that wasn't really as actively as initially.
This project, we had the buy-in from the entire team, so I think that's where your uptake came up. When the head nurses were approached, we knew that this was a need. We identified that need because we would see the exhausted family members that were there time and time again, and we would see them on readmission and coming back to us. So I think maybe in the steps moving forward, what you're describing really sounds like the role of a PIVO nurse in cancer care. That's something that does exist. It's not just a nurse, but somebody who helps the person along their journey in the trajectory of their care. And if you had to do something to pilot something, it would be to put a person in place that would be able to help the patient navigate the system, the caregivers navigate that system, because that seemed to be where the obstacles or the barriers were. So that's maybe steps moving forward. We appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you. A suggestion has been made that this is maybe a service that should be offered by the CLSC. That even if the patient doesn't require services from the CLSC, should there be somewhere at the CLSC who can accompany the caregiver on their journey in this way and deliver this intervention via resource, etc.?
At the moment, you can't request services exactly. So maybe something moving forward.
This will be
perhaps
a future direction.
Yeah.
other comments on that?
Marcella maybe has a comment.
I just wanted to echo what Rosetta was saying, that there was such an active participation from 5 South and 8 Main staff. And I agree, I think that, what we've seen is really the decreased anxiety, the decrease in stress levels, when somebody understands and can navigate the healthcare system, is able to communicate with staff, freely, and that there is a partnership, instead of just, that they're not, or that somehow they're not included at all in, let's say, the discharge planning or the care on the units. We know that the studies have shown that. Dr. McCusker talked about that, and we've seen that echoed again, over and over again. So we're hoping to, sorry, Peter.
Yeah, no, I just want to also reiterate what Rosetta said too, because having worked in cancer care, and I see the role of the people who lives there. Working with the patients, you see the anxiety, the depression, the nervousness, and lack of knowledge of the CLSCs. And I have to say, the CLSCs are out there, but though that's a good suggestion,
They're not accessible.
it's not possible.
Not right now.
Because they don't know each hospital is different, the transition is totally different, etc. So I think if we go along the lines of the pivot kind of definition, I think that would be the right direction.
Yeah.
Going on that, and having worked in discharge planning over the years, that's been a missing link, and I'm glad such a project was done because it does identify very well.
Kind of in the same thought process, do you guys think, and maybe this is something you can answer, in terms of being that person more as a kind of a peer support rather than a professional providing this intervention, do you feel that there's extra value in that type of person to be doing this? And kind of in a second thought, maybe, were there certain limitations that you felt that you had, obviously I'm sure there's lots, in addressing some of the concerns or issues that were coming up during your sessions?
So to address the first question, well, probably the most tragic experience that I've got being a caregiver advocate with all those people was the beginning of my sessions. Basically, people were sitting down in this chair and they were taking a deep breath and they are saying, oh gosh, there is someone who's going to listen today. And I find that it was a significant relief for all those people to have in their mind the assurance that someone is going to sit with them, and even if I am not going to provide them with some miraculous solutions, just being there and listen to their concerns is something that they rate very high. In terms of limitations, well, I hated when I was not able to secure for them any sort of physical help they needed at home. But it was clear, I'm not there for them. And they were hating that too. We like that we have someone who can listen and someone who can partner in order to find some venues to solve our concerns. But sometimes those concerns are so practical, so material, that I cannot do much, and I was feeling bad because I know it's good to be listened, but at the end of the day, you need to find transport, you need to find some hands, some legs, to get you out physically. So I do believe that was the main limitation that I look at. It's the nature of my role at the same time.
How different was your role when people would go back to their house or natural milieu naturel, and how much would that affect your role when they needed to find a place for their elderly? Was that at all different? I don't know how many of them were living in their
Well, they're in their own home.
their own home.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Well, of course, the majority of them were returning at home, and my role was crucial to provide them support even when they're at home, because they have problems, in a sense, being restarted once they are discharged, because they're alone, there is no treating team to support them, and in many instances when we talk about dementia, they're going to be exposed to challenges such as their loved one being too emotional or too aggressive, so they need to find some ways to help themselves, and they need to be encouraged to reach out to those resources. So they need a channel to give them a sense of empowerment and courage and motivation, and sometimes just someone to follow up on where they are at in this process of self-helping themselves. So I would say that maybe, I don't know about the business, but a huge percentage of my sessions were also being done over the phone with people who are already home.
Just to add a comment that thank you for doing this study, because there is a lot of population that are aging who lives help at home. I think, in my opinion, this research in whatever you did to link them to community resources will also decrease the cost of staying in the hospital, so they need healthcare. Just a comment to add.
Yes, that's the hope, and some of the literature does suggest that a good caregiver intervention can reduce readmission. Well, when caregiver support is integrated with discharge planning, then readmissions can be prevented, and some studies show fewer hospital days are needed. So that's your point.
Thanks very much. Very interesting. Super presentation in such a matter. I'm a pharmacist, and on the floors, the pharmacists are involved in discharge planning, and they know how it's a tense moment and often a rush moment, and so many challenges. So thanks a lot. I'm just wondering if at this stage you produce any tools yet, any lists, any tools, or if it's too early on to produce any tools available to anyone. I mean, whether it's just us for now, or publish something, and also with services in English sometimes versus services in French, that can be an issue as well, from what I understand.
So I think that we've been pretty successful, and I would say then did a lot of the research about the resources that exist out there, and was able to provide, to my knowledge, as much as the information that was requested, let's say, by the caregivers. I think one thing that this does illustrate, I might be going off a little bit, but I think this does illustrate over in time again, and you can hear it from the staff members and even other people that are asking the questions, there's a gap between the hospitalization and going home. The CLSC, so we know, well, the staff understands well what would be what would probably be best that, care, both emotional support and physical support for that person to not be readmitted again, or the hope that there's not going to be readmission, and also that the caregiver will not burn out, because that's one of the other reasons for readmission. And the CLSCs understand what they need to do, or what they have a good understanding also of the needs of the patients or caregivers that are out there in the community. And yet, there still needs to be this bridge. There needs to be something that's not yet there. And this exists in pretty much every institution. And we see it time and again. So we're hoping that this project, and as we talk about one of the components, this we know has had a positive impact. So do we integrate it into more comprehensive discharge planning? Because the more comprehensive that discharge planning is, even though there might be a lack of resources on the CLSC side, it will still help to, as you can see, it's helped to decrease some stress in terms of navigating the system, or even accessing information and resources that exist out in the community, which can be helpful in the interim period. So this is something to consider. And there's another.
Yeah, well, I can just say a little bit about the tools issue specifically, so that during the course of the study, Van, together with other members of the team, put together kind of an inventory of resources, written materials, different situations, guides to services in the community, caregiver type materials, what else? Oh, tips on how to communicate with busy healthcare professionals, that type of thing. I don't think anything was made up from scratch, but it was assembled. And so the English and French versions, I believe, were slightly different, but we put together what was available. I don't know whether that could be shared with people. I guess it could be, because there's nothing really innovative, it just is put together. So yes, if you want to contact us, we could let you know what's available.
So I was just wondering about the possibility of, like, if we think with this idea of the peer support group, was there any sense that, or is there a way that each caregiver can have a space where they can connect with one another? Right, because like I'm hearing this idea of creating a list, right, of the different services, like an inventory of all the services that exist. But I think there's a lot to be said from the memory as well, that each caregiver and the knowledge that they develop, right, and that they could share as well. And I think you could have basically this idea of support, another person listening. You could also at times find other more concrete support as well, right? And I'm just wondering if that exists, or if there's ways in which the caregivers are organizing themselves.
So there's actually, I have to, so I'm going pre-merger time because so CLSC René Cassin, they had developed a very nice caregiver network. In other words, there were sort of these different community organizations that gave, where you could access caregiver support were around the table, along with the institutions at the time, St. Mary's, the Jewish General, and the CLSCs in this area. From there, one of the issues that kept coming up was, how do caregivers get together if they're all caregiving in their homes, right? So they came up with something kind of, in my view at the time, very innovative, which was something called Caring Voice. I'm not sure to what extent if it's continued to be funded, or if it's still, I think it's still something that's out there, where caregivers from their home can call into little mini seminars, into little workshops that they can listen to on the phone. Is it ideal? No, because it's important to have face-to-face contact, but we know that a lot of times caregivers, there are times that when they are available vary. Sometimes people cannot in the evening, but sometimes the caregiver support groups are in the evening. Sometimes they're during the day. It's just that they saw that was an issue, so they tried to have people call in and be able to listen to different types of caregiving issues that might pertain to them.
The interesting thing that in reusing this idea, they could translate that into a podcast.
Yeah.
Because like people could share their own experience of little clips, and then you create a podcast of that, and then people can connect to it whenever they want in their own home, and they could like themselves share and record their own session or podcast, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And not to plug for health experiences.
Yeah.
So just to, and it's a little plug for healthexperiences.ca, but definitely a merited one, because this is hard work that they've been doing. Dr. Susan Law and her team as well have created a website where healthexperiences.ca, and where you can go and you can listen to caregivers talk about their experiences, which we've found, or we've seen that is, as you said, it's important when you hear your story in somebody else's story, and how we can connect and know, that people don't necessarily feel alone in their journey as caregivers. And sometimes it's in those places where people might offer their own ideas, or they might offer solutions or something that they might have tried out that's really kind of helpful for the person watching. So I think if you get a chance to go to healthexperiences.ca I think you'd be able to see, so the one for caregivers is complete, and now they're working on different ones there as well. And I'll just pass it on to Ella, because she may want to.
I just want to comment, because I think that this is a very good comment, what you're saying. And I think that, all these online options are very good, but they are not necessarily the only ones, and not, don't necessarily satisfy the needs of caregivers. In New York State, there is, I'm not quite sure where it is exactly, there is a caregiver center in one of the hospitals. And I think that this is exactly what may, if it exists, may be able to, to address the needs of caregivers to share their experiences. Because I think that this is what you're talking about. Now, the reason why we brought this project to the hospital is we thought, and I think that we basically found out that, it was correct, that if we really want to address the needs of caregivers who come to the hospital, we have to do that here. It doesn't matter that after that, Ven could speak with them from their home, but the initial contact would have been in the hospital when they are coming or when they came with their loved ones. So I think that, the sharing of experience, and this I can say from my experience at AMI Quebec, many of our programs are self-help and sharing of experiences, and, much of my experience suggests that this is the most important element of, of health that we can offer. We have all kinds of support groups and workshops, and time and again, people say that the sharing of experience, the hearing, listening to what other people are going through has been very helpful. So, if we can dream about having some sort of a center, it doesn't really have to have anything, but a place where caregivers can get together on their, on time, I think that it would address your question.
I think we're running out of time, but this is the key message, and thank you very much for leading you on this important statement. Well, again, it's a great answer to the title, SOS Caregivers, and I really thank you, Dr. Amir, Dr. Kosker, Marcella, and other people from the team. So Ven, Manon, and Claudia. So thank you very much. Thank you for your comments and questions. It was very, very, very mindful. Brings a lot of food for thoughts, and the message for the SUS is how can we secure the program, and what types of intervention can be derived from the intervention you've experienced and you've experimented. So we'll work on that. Hopefully get more answers. Okay, so thank you very much and have a good day.